and I call to order the regular meeting for the Leominster Conservation Commission for October 8th, 2019. Is someone here for the first hearing?
So the first hearing, they did request a continuance to October 22nd meeting.
Okay, that is 499 Wachusett Street, Assessors Map 381, Parcel 1, DEP 199-1095. That's the solar farm project. Is there any update, or they just asked for a continuance?
He is requesting continuance.
Okay, and when's that? 20?
So the 22nd.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Second one, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, is amended to be a public hearing to consider notice of intent by Charles Doyle, prepared by DeRosa Environmental for Aquatic Management Program at Doyle Pond to control invasive common reed growth, utilizing treatments with U.S. EPA Mass State Registered Aquatic Herbicides, Algicides, and other BMPs. This project is within riverfront area and land underwater. Address is 282 Day Street, map 564, parcel 85, DEP 199-1098. Is there someone here? Yes, sir.
Good evening, members of the commission. Glad to be back, extended. An update from the continuation. I met with Angela yesterday on site, and I believe the majority of the questions could be answered, if not all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So where do we want to start?
What was discussed, or what did you see at the site visit yesterday?
So when around the site, we noticed that the water level was actually particularly low. We took a look at the dam, at the different vegetation on the site, where the cattails are towards the back of the property, or the back of the dam. There was a very small flow coming out. I would say maybe like 2 inches of a straight flow. It was flowing pretty hard, but it wasn't really. For some reason, the water is fairly low over there. But they would be able to enter it from the beach side. There's 2 houses there, but they're both owned by the gentleman applicant, so they'd be able to enter from the side that has the beach without any issues with the secondary house. Do you want to go over the information from Dominic? Did you send him you guys your report? Did you have that?
I have an email of it. Yeah, I can go over that as well.
Did DEP have any comments?
They did. Over at the September 10th meeting.
Did we? Okay.
Hold on.
Well, I should look that up. One quick question. I know it was brought up at the last meeting, but just, it was a while ago. As far as like controlling the herbicides to make sure that nothing leaves the pond during application, how are you going to ensure that nothing leaves?
It looks like there's a dam where there is outflow, and that can definitely be blocked off and made sure that nothing comes out for outflow.
Now, would you do a drawdown prior to, just to get the water level to the point where if you did get a rain event, it's not going to...
We could, depending on the lifespan of the herbicide
Yeah.
and the weather forecast, we could do a drawdown easily. If it's a long term, if we have a week of, a half-life of 2 days, and it isn't going to rain for a week.
Yeah, and based on the vegetation that we observed there, the main herbicide we would use would be Tribune or diquat dibromide, and the concentration that we use would be per the label, and then we do half of that concentration for the water body, depending on how big it is. And based on that, it also will dissipate to about 10% of its initial concentration that is put into the water within 24 hours, if that helps ease a little more.
If I remember right, there was open water, but then there was an area that was marshy. Is that correct?
Well, the water, because it's so low, usually that the whole pond is water, but we haven't had rain in quite a while.
Right.
It's only fed by basically rain.
So there's no stream
No,
ready
there's a
feeding?
stream, there is, you know, a connection through marshland and everything that goes up, say, to Whalen. But if it's not raining, nothing's stopping it.
Okay,
So I guess it would be fed, but it wouldn't rise without a rain event.
right. Okay.
That's why it's so low now, just we haven't had rain to keep it up. It's the end of the summer. This is lower than normal, but usually in the summer, come spring, the whole thing's full all the way back to the back of the cat nine tails. If you saw the watermark on there, it's probably, usually 2.5 feet higher, maybe 3 feet higher on the tails.
Now, what is the plan again for the cattails? Because, I mean, it looks like it's a sizable area, and that does provide habitat, so
Yeah, the plan is to remove some of the root system and the plant physically and a little bit of the leaf litter, and then move that to the beach area that the hydro rake would be launched from, and then to still leave a substantial amount of cattails for habitat while still also helping expand the pond.
Now, when you say, like, are we talking like 50%, 25%? Like, I'm looking at this area, I mean, would you be cutting it down the middle, taking the left side, taking most of it, leaving, like, what is the actual plan to? Because, I mean, the habitat is like when you've got a good amount of it all at once. So if you were to like just clear just to the shore and just left a narrow amount, that doesn't really provide the habitat. Where if you leave a larger clump, that's what provides a little bit of shelter and a little bit of habitat. So like, what is the overall plan to remove?
I'm sure that, again, a substantial clump would still be left, but I want to say maybe close to 50, and probably not do like left half or right half, or more so kind of,
Front to back.
yeah, almost front to back, but still leave a substantial amount in the back.
I mean, this is like one of the things that I had mentioned the last time was to sort of have a diagram of what, like a pre and post, so that we identify where like potential habitat areas are. Because we don't really, right now, we don't have anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be, done by an engineer. It can just be a drawing, with approximates. But like, I know when Lake Samoset did it, they had a drawing of the map, and they indicated, like, they put an X where there was a stump that came out of the water, and that was potential habitat. And then they knew, because in those areas you're not supposed, I think it's a 50-foot buffer that you're not supposed to apply an herbicide.
Okay.
Within 50 feet of an area that's habitat. So we want to identify those areas that need to be protected, and so that we get an idea of what it's going to look like pre and post, and where the chemical is going to be applied.
Okay.
And it can be done by hand, like just something, like, I think the way that they did it, they just hand drew the map, of the lake, or traced it from something else.
So is that something that we determined tonight? We just draw a line at 50%, or is that something that has to be?
Well, I mean, we don't have anything right now. We don't have anything for the file. This is something we need to have on record, because, if something happens and, next week, or next year when it's all done, there's no cattails left. At least we have something to go back on. And this is what was supposed to happen. So we have a point of reference for the file. We want to. I mean, chemical applications, to me, I think it's important to have that habitat marked out, because it's going to impact where you can apply chemicals. Because if you can't apply within so many feet of a habitat, you may find that, whatever plan you're proposing right now, you may not get the best results, and you may have to alter like the chemicals you use or the strategy you use or whatever. So that's why we usually ask to have like a plan. It's like if someone comes in for a house, first thing they do is they show us what the property looks like with the resource areas and what it looks like before and after they put the house in.
Okay. I think there's only one herbicide that we would use for cattails as well, which I know hinder environment, or I guess could kill off the potential cattails, and then all the other herbicides or algicides that are used wouldn't have an effect on them. But yeah, we'll make sure to.
Yeah, because when I look at this, I mean, if you were to I don't know, just theoretically, if you were to take and split it down the middle and just eliminated the right side, it looks like most of that area is going to be within 50 feet of the other cattails, so you really can't apply chemicals there. So that's why we need an overall plan.
Okay.
And that may not be, I mean, I believe that was a regulation when like Sam said, so I mean, I could even be wrong and that's not an actual requirement, but I believe it was 50, there was a certain distance from wildlife habitat that they weren't allowed to apply. I mean, you might know if you're an applier, I mean.
Usually we'll get the specific area to avoid within 50 feet of. But also I believe the herbicides that would be used in the target species would be on the opposite side of where that wetland would be as well. So that could also help be with preventative maintenance of that as well. To prevent extra cattail reduction and habitat reduction.
And you're just going to pull the cattails by hand?
It's with the hydro rake, which is still pretty precise. It's very.
Okay, so I remember you saying you were going to move them to the beach, but it's a hydro rake that's actually going to
Yes,
rake them up.
it'll be once the water level rises again.
Yeah.
So most likely when the snow melts.
Yeah.
Or larger rain event if approved, but yeah.
Refresh my memory, what's the purpose of doing all of this ultimately?
Just that it's gonna eventually be 100% filled in with muck. And when I bought it 25 years ago, there was nothing. No, weeds, cat nine tails, nothing. And now, everything's Kevlar. Everything grows in it. Just try to get the water quality up. There used to be a ton of fish in it. It keeps on going down and down and down and down. Turtles, everything, wildlife in there is going the opposite direction.
Essentially prolong the process of it filling up and getting
Algae is
overrun.
incredible now in the summer, just because it's getting, shallower and shallower, and the water quality is going down, it's like PC problem.
I'm just looking at a Google Earth shot of the lake, or the pond. Your house is the one with the beach?
He owns both, if you don't mind.
Sorry.
He owns both those properties. And
My
this is-
brother owns the smaller lighthouse, but
Okay,
which one?
Yeah, and then the machine would be launched from here,
right.
and
Where's the majority of cattails over
the
this
majority is
swampy
right here,
area?
yes.
Okay. So most of that, so the hydro raking is gonna be for that.
Well, not the whole area, obviously.
Right, but I mean, that's.
Maximum 50%.
Right,
And still leave probably from here on
right.
whatever can be reached here, but then still leave a substantial amount.
Maybe using other chemicals.
Yeah, so herbicides would typically be used probably either my apologies, halfway around the water body edge,
Okay,
or mainly just down here.
okay. And that's obviously for algae and other species of plants.
Yes. And then it wouldn't be eradicating the entire pond of those species, but still to knock them back, keep them short vegetation, still leave that for habitat as well underneath the water.
Okay. So Larry, it sounds like you want kind of a,
Yeah, an overall
even if it's kind of a
picture.
Google Earth picture that someone kind of draws a line. and says,
Yeah, like this is
kind
the
of-
areas we're gonna treat, this is the areas we're not gonna touch. I mean, it looks like from the pictures, I don't see anything that would be habitat outside of the cattails. I don't see any standing stumps or
Yeah, there wasn't much.
anything
It
like
was
that.
fairly.
But we should have, I mean, typically when we get, when people have come in, you know, there's an overall plan of what the property looks like, the specific areas where they're targeting, and then,
Was that on the NOI that was sent in? No? I'll have to talk to my people.
Is that something that the commission would like to condition in the order of conditions to proceed before work can begin, since they're probably not gonna be able to work until the spring anyways?
I guess that's a question is when, I know herbicides and different things have to be treated at different times.
Oh, yeah. A majority of like the herbicides and algicides would be used during the summer months.
Okay,
So typically, a maintenance contract would run from April to September. So I guess
would any work, physical work, take place this fall?
that would be dependent on rain events and also the approval of the NOI.
Okay.
So if possible, sure. And that depends what.
Well, I didn't know if
like
if you're gonna do some hydro raking or anything physical. I mean, obviously you're not gonna put chemicals that need
Oh yeah, no
new growth
herbicide or algicide applications would be applied until
until
a
next year.
permit is approved, and then
Right, but I'm
following-
saying even if you got approved tonight, wait 10 days.
we would still wait until like.
You'd still be waiting until next spring,
Yes.
summer.
Mhm,
But I just wondering if anything would happen in the next month. Or get really
No
cold.
herbicide or algicide applications within the next month.
yeah, I would rather see that, an overall plan. And, you know, just, because if we have questions, you know, about, you know, how, you know, once we have the physical plan, you have something to look at and reference, and then we have something for the record. And we ask it of every other person that, any other time people have come in for aquatic, you know, vegetation, you know, management, they do the same thing. It's usually, I think it's part of the state requirement. You don't just go and apply it, you have to give them a plan of what you're doing, so.
DEP comments, was there anything major in there?
They've met most of the DEP comments.
Okay.
I'm not on the screen.
Thought you were ready.
I was, when you guys are talking. You guys said the NOI should be updated, which they did send in the updates. It is in the Google Drive. I have a hard copy here as well. In my opinion, these should probably just be recorded with the NOI, or should they submit a whole new NOI page? Because there's a certain sections like section A6 and section B. And they had questions about where the compressor cabinet would be located, which they addressed in this packet as well, as where the hydro rake would be able to access the pond. And then they also suggested, you know, it should be included, you know, what species are out there, and the coverage and the proposed areas of treatment and the by treatment type, the proposed lake location of the aeration system, and any areas of the pond that will remain untreated. And so
Kind of
we
what you
have,
were asking them for,
Yeah,
was
so
that
we-
last section.
So I guess, yeah, more
it's
specifically.
suggested, it's not,
yeah.
I guess it's probably not required, since
Yeah.
they didn't say it was required.
But more specifically too, even just with the map, like the areas you are gonna treat, just list the target vegetation.
Okay.
So the vegetation's pretty spread out. When we were there, it's,
Yeah, it looked like a mix of bladderwort and elodea, which
Yeah.
are both native, but they can also grow to nuisance levels. And then I'm assuming a lot of algae
yeah, there's a lot
from
of-
the client. Hard to see that in October. But
then they just had questions about the multiple proposed chemicals in the NOI, and they wanted to know what order they'd be used in.
I can kind of address that. I mean, our plan isn't to use every single proposed chemical
Yeah.
or herbicide that is in the proposal. And usually it would be a specific amount, and it would vary on the seasonal growth of the submerged vegetation and the algae. Typically, the submerged vegetation will grow faster than the algae earlier in the season, so it would probably be tribune based on the species that are there that we observed. And then later on in the summer, when the algae starts blooming, it would probably be the copper-based algicides. And then, dependent later on in the season, if the vegetation starts to keep expanding and growing back to nuisance levels, that as well. If that helps.
So that is in the packet that they had sent along.
Mr. Conley, you got a question?
Yeah, once we determine the percentage of the material that's going to be removed, you know, wherever it's going to be, where is it being removed to and how is it getting there?
Well, once the material is removed, it will be brought to the beach, and there will be hay bales set up on the shoreline so that the water can still come back into the water body, but not the material that was removed. And then I believe the material that was removed on site would be put into
Dump truck.
a dump truck and then brought to.
So there's, I believe there's one at the end of Jungle Road, and there's one down in North Leominster, I believe, sites that take brush and all this other compost and stuff. I believe you get the names of them. That'll be where we get the living.
Okay, and do you have an idea as to how many cubic yards of material? You said 50%.
I will bring that up with.
I'm just
That's
curious,
curious, yeah.
that could become quite a task to
Yeah.
transport that stuff over the driven everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it'll be left to dry before exported out, so it'll probably be lighter as well.
And do we have a list of obligated species that are in that pond? Fish, turtles, ducks, whatever? Is that a requirement that the DEP was asking?
It's typically provided.
It's a suggestion.
It's part, I mean, that's part of like, that was, when they're identifying habitat, it's typically include like what.
But I don't see that in the NOI.
No, it's
I mean,
in
if
the
we're going to
end.
be dumping chemicals in it, would be nice to know what's in there.
Yeah.
You know, because certain species are going to tolerate things better than others.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was, you know, when we get like a habitat analysis of the water body, that's usually included. Not just the habitat, but what the native species are.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to see that and just
Yeah,
I
I
would
agree
read
with
the
that.
chemicals and see what's there before we say yes or no.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, sir.
I've got a couple. Just going through the NOI, there was a little bit of discussion about dry down. Is that part of the application or not?
I'm not entirely sure. I believe that's if a rain event were to occur, based on the discussions that we've had, at least within a couple days. But again, the herbicides that we use mainly would have be back down to a 10% of the concentration from when it was applied within 24 hours. And it does not go into groundwater or into the sediment.
How big is the dam that's there? How high is it roughly?
The what?
How high is the dam roughly?
The dam, how high is it roughly?
5 feet, spillway.
Is that on the state's inventory? Have you had to do a phase 1 study for that?
Spent a lot of money on it.
Yeah, so you have.
Emergency management program.
Have you done an emergency action plan for it as well?
Due in December,
Okay.
yeah.
So it's got to be at least 6 feet high or have 15 acre feet to get on their list typically. So you're probably at 6 feet high or bigger.
Well, yeah, the dam itself is higher than that, the spillway's 6 feet,
Yeah. Okay.
so.
I mean, were there any structural deficiencies in the dam noted in that phase 1 study, or?
No, I had it rebuilt in 2000.
So what's there for outlet control structure, if anything? Is it just the spillway, or is there anything that allows you to mechanically draw that down?
Yeah, it has boards in it.
Has
Spillway has-
flashboards in it, or stop logs or something? So my only, I mean, frankly, I'm satisfied with the NOI part in terms of the treatment that you want to do. My only concern is the specifics on any mechanical alteration of that pond level, like how it's gonna be done, when it's gonna be done, to what degree, just so that we don't have any downstream impacts that we have to worry about there, as well as, any chemicals getting out that other commissioners have mentioned. And I'm glad that you have had the phase 1 study done, and working on the EAP for it.
I think it's every 5 years.
That helps. So you've probably got some professionals working on
Yeah,
that for you.
GPR out of Shirley,
Okay.
Colson.
And, the state regulations allow local commissions to do up to a 3-foot drawdown. We can't really permit on our own anything above and beyond that. So that's something to think about as part of this as well. I don't know if you've considered that at all, possibly looking at doing a seasonal one in the winter to see if that might have any effect on what's there.
Yeah.
But that's something to think about too. So I've seen a lot of mixed results with the dry downs.
Yeah, it
A lot
doesn't
of
seem
times.
too much.
Yeah, well, a lot of times what happens is that you might kill off what you intend and something else just replaces it, so. That's all I have. Thanks.
What, commissioners, do you want to see this information prior to moving to a vote? Do you want to condition it, and how do you want to move forward with it?
Personally, I prefer to see it all for, just, I'd rather vote on something I can see. And it doesn't sound like it's gonna impact, it's not like they're gonna be treating chemicals in the next month, so.
Right. Okay. I guess my question is, do you know what you need? Do you know the list of information we're looking for?
I'm jotting down notes.
So obviously, Mr. Giannakis is looking for, and like he said, it can just be, even if it's a Google, I'm assuming Google Earth probably just enough to say, hey, we're gonna treat this
Area where this is
species,
gonna be.
we're gonna treat this species.
Is that for just the physical removal or also for the chemical applications? Because the chemical applications usually varies on the season and the seasonal growth of the vegetation that's there.
Well, just to kind of give you, when we've had them before, basically what they do is they give us a map of the area, and they shaded, the area that had, one type of weed, they shaded one way, just with hash marks, and then the area that had, a different target species, they would just indicate a different way, and then they would kind of show us the area that was going to be treated, and they had a list of how they would treat each area. They marked off the areas that said, hey, this is wildlife habitat, and then that showed that there was an area that wouldn't be treated with chemicals. There was I think it was that 50-foot buffer around that. So it's sort of just a, I think Lake Samoset, when they did it, they just used they put diagonal lines for milfoil and.
No, that's
Yeah.
Okay.
So nothing fancy.
I've just seen those. Okay.
Mr. Conway, you wanted
What?
Species list,
some sort of species list of, turtles, fish, something like that.
probably the species list for the pond.
And Mr. Stone, did you want anything specific?
Only if they plan on doing an actual drawdown.
Drawdown, when that would be, and, okay.
Yeah, but otherwise, I'm okay with their treatment plan as is.
All right, so I'm assuming you'd ask for a continuance. Do you think you'd be ready for the next meeting, which is,
October 22nd.
October 22nd?
We should be ready for the next
All right,
week.
we'll put it on there. If not, to save yourself some time, if you're not gonna make it just prior to this, just let Angela know that
Okay.
we're missing some stuff, and,
Yeah, it's like, we'll almost have it together. Okay.
instead of coming in
Talk to
here
my
and
people.
asking for continuance, you can do that prior to this.
Sounds good. So,
All right,
ask for a
very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, of course, guys. Thanks for your time. Hope it's not too long tonight.
All right, so that's continued. This is continued now. All right. Is Mr. Morrow gonna be here representing for Mary
No.
Ave and?
He requested a continuance for those ones, as well as those 3 projects need to be re-advertised because we no longer have a quorum.
Okay. So we starting from scratch, or we, what's?
We just have to re-advertise for them. So
Okay.
we're working on that process right now, so it should be on for the November meeting because we missed the October 22nd deadline due to the holidays.
Okay. So all three are continued. All right. Roach Ave, someone here representing Roach Ave.
That project is continued due to the state, unfortunately, has not issued a DEP file number yet.
Okay, that was 19 Roach Ave, map 262-18A. So that'll be continued to the October meeting,
Yes, October 22nd.
okay? And what about Abbott Ave? Is someone representing Abbott Ave? All right. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40 is amended, there will be a public hearing to consider request for determination from Rainey Richard, represented by Hannigan Engineering, regarding whether the proposed work to relocate a sewer line subject to the Wetlands Protection Act, address Abbott Ave, map 551, parcel 3. Yes, sir.
So we're looking for Sanderson here on behalf of Rainey Richard for the RDA to determine whether or not the proposed work is subject to the Wetlands Protection Act. The project is generally located at the intersections of Abbott and Field Road. Field Road is actually along the top portion of the site, and Abbott runs along the side of the page here. Currently, there is an existing house at number 16 Field Road. Currently, we just went through the A&R process to subdivide the property into 3 different lots. As part of that, we need to relocate the sewer line that crosses across what's known as Lot 3, which is this lower corner of the site, and essentially wrap it around the outer perimeter of the property in order to allow for the sale of the property and for further development down the road. At this point in time, the only work that's being proposed is this drainage line or this sewer line relocation. The site is primarily woodland along the immediate vicinity of Abbott Road, and the border and the resource areas are located on the opposite side of Abbott Road, and it's just limited to bordering vegetative wetlands. So the 100-foot buffer does encroach along the frontage areas of the actual 2 lots and whatnot. We'll be installing straw wall and silt fence on the opposite side of the roadway, on top of the roadway. There's actually an existing crown within the road, so that any water, it's really unlikely that any water from the proposed construction of the sewer main will actually get into this resource area. Besides that, there's really not much else to the project. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Questions or comments from the commission? When's the work gonna get taken? Is it, when's it gonna take place, this year or next?
We're hoping to get at least the sewer line in this year.
This year?
Yeah.
Okay. And what does, what's the site look like for topo?
It's the existing house is kind of sitting on top of a knoll.
Okay.
It drops down about 10 feet and then hits a plateau, and it's essentially almost dead flat through the frontage of Abbott
Okay.
Road.
So during construction, is any major rain, it's gonna have to go across the roadway?
It has to go along the roadway to one of the catch basins. And if it does get to that point, we can always start installing K-bells and check dams along the way,
Okay.
preventing sediment migration.
So there's catch basins in front of that property, or?
At the intersection of Field and Abbott.
Okay.
So you're looking at about almost 200 feet away. On essentially almost a dead flat field.
So there's gonna be no hay bales or silt fence on the property line where it butts the street at all, or?
No, because there's really nothing there to create the gradient in order to get the runoff to start moving sediment in that area.
So all the stockpiling will be
All the stockpiling was going to be probably located further up into the upland areas.
And are you running one line and then, is the other one getting abandoned, or is it getting dug up?
It's still being worked out whether or not it's still usable, for lack of a better term. But it's anticipated that we're going to be putting at least a stub off of this sewer main for the future development of lot number 3. It's anticipated that lot number 2 can make its own connections within the roadway when that time comes.
Where is existing house 16? Where is that connected to the sewer line?
Well, that's the reason behind doing this work. Because currently the line crosses lot 3, we can't physically sell the property unless when it starts switching hands.
So they're in that line right now.
Yeah, so right now, the number 16 owns the entire property, so it's under common ownership. In order to start releasing these lots, we have to relocate that sewer line.
Questions? Yes, sir.
So, I mean, looking at the project in its entirety, in my opinion, I think it's worthy of a negative determination. I do have a couple concerns though. Most of the time, when you think about wetland impacts, most of our problems come from erosion control problems with sediment hitting the street and the wetland. It's never a direct shot. So I appreciate that there's a crown there, but I don't look at that as the sediment having to get over to the crown into that wetland. Once it hits the road, at some point it's going to get in the drainage system. So a simple minor condition is just to install erosion control at the street right of way, so that anything upland of that is going to be contained before it hits the road. I think that's something that whoever's working on that trench can do at the end of the day, or just make sure it's buttoned up should you get a major event. Is that going to be done this fall?
It's intended to try to get it done
Right.
this fall.
I mean, going into the rainy season, so a lot can happen. Believe me, I've seen it.
I've seen it.
So just be, I think you don't need much there. Just something to keep it from what
Just
you
pretty
think is
much
supposed
right
to get
around the
onto the
trench,
street.
just put a little bit of a
Right. Yep.
easier.
And then my other comment is just for future planning, although I'm inclined for a negative for this application, as these lots become, I presume, residential developments, there's not a lot of buffer zone there, but those type of developments are where we typically have our problems if we're gonna have impacts. So you might wanna think about submitting NOIs for those, when those eventually go through. That's it.
Any other questions or comments? All right, anybody in the audience like to speak on this RDA? Second time and final time. All right, do I have a recommendation from our agent?
I recommend that we issue a negative determination. Negative determination 3, as the work is within the buffer zone, as defined in regulations, will not alter an area subject to protection. Therefore, said work does not require the filing of a notice of intent, subject to Mr. Stone's conditions that they find up, they clean up the site in the night and add erosion controls along the roadway.
Okay. Do I have a motion for that -3 with the added conditions or something else?
Make a motion for a -3 determination with the added condition of the erosion controls.
Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
All in favor? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Alright. Sir, what hearing are you here for?
30 Bosco Bell Lane, Jonathan Payne.
All right. Do we have an issue
Yes.
moving that forward?
No, I don't have an issue with
Okay.
it.
So that is under enforcement.
Yes.
So what's going on, Angela?
Last week I received a message that there was some disturbance happening on land that was owned by the trustees next to a perennial stream that wasn't supposed to be touched. I took a ride out there, I took a look, I gave everyone pictures of the site, I believe. Did I not give you some help? Sure, I did that, I tried not to pick too many. And it looked like, I'm sorry, I'm trying. When I got to the site, there was a significant site disturbance, looking, from the roadway and from the land trustees' land. it was quite obvious that there is a stream bed there and quite possibly bordering vegetated wetland. And the whole side of the house looks like it was clear. There's a lot of dirt everywhere. There's no erosion controls in place and no permitting was filed. And there was an issue. I'm still waiting to find a contact with land of the trustees, but it looks like where that stockpile is quite possibly the trustees' conservation land.
Okay.
That's used for the subdivision.
Where is Boscobel Lane?
Dogwood.
It's off of Dogwood. Liz has the quad map
Okay.
in the front of hers.
Oh, yeah.
And I marked where the house is.
Okay. And you are the
I'm the owner, yeah.
Okay.
So I had a couple loads of material dropped off my house, because on the left-hand side of my driveway, not the stream side, it was a big dip. So I was just filling that in, and then on up top where it was, where the load was, there was like brush that people have been dumping there for years, because it was unoccupied before I bought it for 3 years. So I just pushed it back a little bit, and then it just came out like that. The stuff further down my driveway, I got lazy with the backhoe and just kind of ran through it. And that's why it looks like further down, and that's what it was, so. But today, there was erosion control. I put some silt fence in and some check dams. So it's all buttoned up, ready to go, and I'll keep an eye on it. So just let me know what you want me to do to make sure it's right.
So what exactly are you doing?
I was just filling in my left-hand side of my driveway, that's it, and I got a hole
Okay.
in the back that I think whoever built the place buried stumps, and there's a 6-foot hole that's taking my shed down. I was gonna fill that in, move the shed back a little bit. And then there's 3 loads there now, and my other neighbor, he wanted to load, because I think they buried stumps in his yard too, so we're gonna fill in another hole for him. That was my plan, until I got a letter. I thought it was just drainage, I didn't know it was a stream, that's why, you know.
So is this impacted any resource area?
I didn't
or is
enter
it-
I only walked down the driveway and knocked on the door, and no one was home. I didn't enter, I didn't step on the property to do a full inspection.
Okay.
But there are concerns for the River Protection Act, how much area was disturbed, as well as how much wetland area was possibly affected.
I didn't push anything further back than that wasn't already there from the building.
Okay.
So it's just all brush, it's all brush, wood chips. Like I said, it wasn't occupied for 3 years before I bought it in 2012. So everybody thought it was a dump site. And the people, all the neighbors are still dumping their stuff down there. So I'm trying to clean it up I was gonna put a corral fence along the cul-de-sac itself, so the snow, the loader from the snow doesn't push it all back over there. Because all the curbing's all ripped up and everything. So I'm just trying to clean it up, that's all. I didn't know it was wetlands.
Okay. So what would you like to do?
Oh, well, that's up to the
Well, I
commission.
know, but what,
Yeah.
I just not knowing the site would.
Yeah, it was,
That's why I said, is it actually impacted area, or is it just potential, but you don't know at this point?
yeah, because I didn't go fully onto the site. I didn't walk down there and take soil samples or anything. I also I didn't have a wetland delineation to go by either, because there's no file for the house. But from one concern, once I had to contact Mr. Vivenzi, because I believe he owns the Leominster Land Trust now, is that a large portion of his land was cleared. That's supposed to be conservation land for that subdivision, so it might have some impacts.
He's the one that built the place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. it's
Well,
good.
so when they build, sometimes they build different subdivisions, they have to donate land to conservation.
Oh, okay.
That land is supposed to be untouched. There can
Oh.
be, there can be some legal ramifications.
So along the further down on my driveway on the right-hand side, is it okay if I put riprap down there to seal that so it doesn't take my driveway with it?
So that's really up to the commission. It looks like some trees were cleared out of that area, looking at the Google images.
That was on the top of the cul-de-sac?
Yeah, the top of the cul-de-sac,
Yeah, that
as
was
well as
the
along
city came by
driveway.
last winter and they actually cut those birch trees down. And then they just left them there, and I just pushed them back into the woods. When they did brush clearing up along the Bull Road, they come around the whole side over there.
So there is a sewer easement, which they are allowed to cut trees down around the sewer easement.
They were just doing 10 feet off the road, and then they just cut them down, and then the wire ever broke on their chipper. You're like, oh, lunchtime, and they took off, and they never came back.
Contact DPW to pull the work order on that.
Yeah. But they cut down, I think there was probably a 12-inch birch, and then there was one that was dead next to it. They cut those two down.
What time of year was this?
I'm gonna say, January maybe? December, January?
2018?
Yeah. 18, 19. I was laid off, so I was home. So
Yeah.
If it's past December 24th, I'm working, well, before I'm working, so. But I'll do whatever you want me to do, make it right. I mean, I'm not here to backfill wetlands and make my property bigger. I just wanted to clean it up. That was my whole purpose.
Yeah, I think the big thing is to identify what's resource area and what's not.
Yeah,
That's the
and
biggest.
I had no,
Yeah.
I thought because there was brush all back there, I was just trying to clean it up, make
Yeah.
it look good for myself, so if I ever want to do sell the place,
Yeah.
and people come in, they see a big trash pile there, so.
Yeah.
Instead of that, I should have did it the right way, just pulled it out of there, but then I'm taking everybody's stuff and bringing it somewhere,
Yeah.
But I took the lazy way out, that's what I did. And now I'm here talking to you fine people.
Angela, you may have said this, forgive me if you did. Is that a perennial stream there, or?
It is a perennial stream, so it does, the riverfront protection act applies.
What's perennial? Means-
It's oh, so it means it runs year round as well, or it shows up on the US quad maps, which, it does show up in the US quad maps.
It's all the drainage from all the dogwood comes down, goes right into the pipe runs right there. It's a big 36-inch pipe.
Yeah, so
So
there
that's-
might be
that's
a
what it is.
pipe there, doesn't mean it's just drainage though,
Oh, okay,
it's
right.
a protected resource
Okay.
area.
So what do you want, like, on the right-hand side of my driveway, you have to do a walkthrough with me to let me know what you want me to do, or
It's kind of up to the commission how they wanna enforce the regulations.
you said I'll get a load of
I
riprap?
think-
I'll get a load of riprap dropped off this week, and I'll get it all, So
Well, I think before we kind of do anything, it sounds like a couple commission members, including myself, probably want to take a look at it.
Yeah, I mean, we want to know what's.
Yeah,
resource-
what's
I mean, if it's not jurisdictional, we don't necessarily, I'm less concerned about an area if it's not wetland. We want things stable at this point.
Yeah, well, it is jurisdictional because of the River Protection Act, 200 feet.
Yeah, but I'm saying
so-
wetland, we want to preserve wetland.
Yeah, yeah.
It sounds like he moved brush, which brush can be taken away,
Yeah.
or brush can be left, but if it's soil in a wetland, that's more of a concern.
Yeah, it was just brush, and there was, they cut some stuff up top, somebody cut some trees, they dumped a load of chippings down there. And like I said, the house was a mess, so that wasn't lived in for 3 years, so people were just doing whatever they want down there, so. Like I said, I'm just trying to get around to it now, finally, and, But like I said, if I gotta pull it out of there, it's on me, I guess.
Well, let's get a site walk
Yeah.
together before we kind of do anything, so that way we can decide which
I'll
direction we
just-
want
I
to
know we got a
go.
lot of rain coming, so I'll just keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't get,
Yeah, anything you can do to
Oh, no, I'll do
help
this in the, no.
erosion
Erosion
issues.
control.
Yeah. Like I said, there's 200 feet of silt fence that was installed today, so trust me, I did it myself.
And, so we'll just try to set it up as soon as we can, so we can take a look and,
Okay. So wait to hear from you, or?
Yeah, so if you have everything information, I can
Okay.
send you an email, we can strike that over there.
best way to contact her, whether it's by phone or email. And usually we set up a thing on a doodle, you pick a day and time for kind of a site walk if we can. I don't know if you usually include the homeowners or usually the engineers, but
Yeah, I can't afford an engineer. Yeah. Can you read that, 73?
Oh, yeah.
Horrible handwriting.
No, it's fine.
I just called my phone. I
Okay,
leave a message.
perfect.
Yeah.
Is it JJ or J?
JL.
JL, okay,
JL.
perfect. So make sure I don't- Alright, perfect, I'll send you an email
Awesome,
tomorrow.
thank you.
All
Appreciate
right,
it.
thank you.
Thank you for your
Have a good
time.
night.
the gentleman here from Penny Lane, I see. Do we have any updates? I know Mr. Morrow is not here.
Yes, not at this time due to the fact that they need to re-advertise for the subdivision, which is where they're going to be possibly doing the application area. So there's no update at this time.
Okay. I do apologize. Is there anything you'd like to discuss?
Even though that there's that, right, so I think, right, the enforcement is obviously against me and the builder.
Yes.
I think that Mr. Xeris is taking some goodwill because he wants to sell Harbor Classic Homes that property to build on. Isn't there still some ramification against the builder that needs to take action against having, the activities of notice of intent, against the wetlands to be done to determine what are wetlands, what are not wetlands, how much wetlands to then be able to have replicated? I'm just trying to, it seems like everything's being taken, there's sort of goodwill happening to sort of further, sale and money and the sale of land, but nothing to actually take care of the enforcement order against the property.
So from my understanding, they will be filing a retroactive NOI as part of that.
Now, who
Mr. Morrow said, he was representing, so from my understanding, Mr. Coyview from Harbor Classic Homes is using.
Which is the builder of his property.
Yes, is using Whitnam and Bingham, who is the builder for the Jimmy Xeris property.
Okay.
So they're kind of trying to work out together if they need to replicate, obviously do wetland replication for the wetland area that they filled in. The retroactive NOI needs to include that on it, and since it would have to take place on the other property that Mr. Xeris owns, I believe he owned this property at one point before he sold it to Harbor Classic Homes to build on. So they need to kind of coordinate those projects together, and that's where that is. Okay. So we really won't have an update until they re-advertise and come in with an update, which he said hopefully he would have by the October 22nd meeting, but since they missed that re-advertisement date, it would have to be on the November 12th meeting.
Now, what about the overall, like assessing the property, on Penny Lane and figure out how much wetland filling there was? I mean, is Hannigan gonna be handling that too? So we know.
Whitnam and Bingham, I believe, and Mr. Matt Morrow.
Okay, I wouldn't be inside.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to verify.
Okay. So.
Yeah, the last meeting that Matt said that he didn't represent Harbor Classic Homes, he represented James Xeris, so it was, at least the way that I took it, it was only on the Mary Ave extension. He had no contractual obligation to Penny Lane. And when he did the sidewalk on that Mary Ave extension property, there was basically no walk on my property. So basically no assessment's been done to my property, no flagging, no soil samples, nothing. He came and looked and walked through it to get to the Mary Ave extension and then walked back the other way. But basically all the flagging and work was done on Mr. Xeris' property.
So that was not what was communicated to me from Mr. Morrow, so. Commission wants to, they want me to contact the state and have them contact Mr. Coyview.
Well, I mean, it's well, you guys can chime in, but I mean, I definitely, I just want to make sure that whatever damage that was done by Harbor Classic Homes, and I get this whole Mary Ave and selling property and this and that, but in the meantime, we have a property owner that has issues, so we should really get an answer to the property owner of who is representing Harbor Classic Homes, what is happening. It seems like there's a lot of handshakes and things like that happening, but in the meantime, we have two enforcement orders out there, one against the property owner and one against the builder. But they seem to be not represented here.
Yeah,
that's your issue, correct?
Right. I mean, it's been almost. I mean, we're almost at 5 months, and
Yeah, I was gonna say it's been a long time.
And the builder showed up once, and there's made excuses after excuses as to why he hasn't, or just not shown up.
Right.
Or now he's trying to push it off on somebody else to get done, so, I think they're connected, but they're, in my opinion, they're two separate entities.
Okay. If we can try to get some clarification, if that means reaching out to whatever his name is, Mr. Clearwell, you know, just to see who represents him.
I think, I think that they are two separate issues. I mean,
They
you
are.
know, we're it's sort of, at this point, sort of trying to lump everything together. You know, but these other, was it Mary Ave, whatever, that's been on the agenda for, 6 months, a year? I don't know. It just seems like it's continuation. You know, I can't do this, we're waiting on this. No one shows up for the meeting, or like, you know, there's just, it's constantly one reason or another, but we're kind of forgetting that we have this other issue that's totally, you know, and now they're trying to drag this other house into that long, delayed out, drawn out process.
Yeah, and my other issue has been a handful of times Mr. Morrow has either shown up or at least told you that he wasn't going to be here, but many times our property owner has showed up and we've gotten to it on the agenda and it's been, oh, Mr. Morrow was supposed to be here, but he's not, without any communication to us, and I feel like that's just kind of like, it's wasting our time, it's wasting the property owner's time, so.
Well, we're getting the same treatment that the property owner's getting. You know, here today, gone tomorrow. I mean,
There's just not a lot of
This
communication.
has been going on and on and on. I've seen him come in. He's here every meeting.
Would you like to join?
No, thank you. I appreciate the offer.
No, but he deserves some resolve. He's a taxpayer.
No, I understand
Unity,
that,
and
and
this is
he's
just-
at no fault because he inherited a problem that, you know.
These people need to come in here and it needs to get resolved.
Right, and if, you know, I was kind of under the impression from Mr. Morrow that he was representing both sides.
Yeah.
And maybe I
That's
was,
the impression he gave me as well when we had conversations.
so that's kind of why I was like, all right, that's fine, figure it out, but it may not be, that might not be the case, so we definitely need to figure that out.
So I have notes here, I just want to make sure I clarify. I'm going to give Denise Childs a call from DEP and see if they can assist us with enforcement as well. My only issue with that is Brad may be able to clarify. I don't know if that'll backfire because they have to enforce on the homeowner. I know we issued both of them, but would they be able to only enforce?
Can you just bring me up to speed on where we stand with enforcement again for this, since I still not?
So we issued an enforcement order on Harbor Classic Homes as well as the property owner for building a house without filing an NOI. From my discussions with DEP, they said, they would obviously suggest that the commission does not go after the homeowner, even though typically you go after the property owner. And they said the commission could typically choose to only pursue, the contractor. But they have to issue an enforcement order to both in order.
Well, I don't think the commission can choose to go after the contractor. I think the regulations are pretty explicit. It's the property owner. And then there's a whole bunch of things that come into play here. I can see where this is going. So I'm not gonna spend all night talking about hypotheticals, but I would suggest at this point, at least have a brief conversation with the section chief, if they have any advice. Because I can speculate exactly where this is gonna go. Also be cognizant that they're down 2 staff members at the moment, so you may not get an immediate answer because they've got a lot of other things going on.
So all we can do is try to figure this out, so. Because at this point, so that's gonna be on the November meeting,
12 meetings.
so the November 12th, that's when it's gonna get and we'll start discussing Mary Ave and all that. So, okay. So we will keep you updated. I would not at this point plan on coming to the 22nd. And hopefully we can get you some answers and figure out which direction we're gonna go. And we do appreciate you coming in every meeting. I understand it's your property and you inherited this. But, so that's where we sit.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
right, any objection to moving to 66 Granite Street? Oh,
I was hoping we could go back up to those certificates of compliance. I got someone here for one of the
Oh.
certificates of compliance.
yes, we can do that. All right, certificates of compliance, 73 Mainland Street, DEP 199994.
Yeah, so this property came to me as it was an issue with a sale. Another situation, old development, the contractor never filed for the COC, someone bought the house, now someone's trying to sell the house, and they need to get a COC. I visited the site today. The only thing I could see that wasn't the same as the original plans was that there was a deck put on. I did call the building department to see if there was a permit ever pulled for the deck. It looks like the deck was most likely put on when they built the, like, as they were building the house, as kind of like a secondary thought. But no one really knows. No one really knows because the contractor obviously isn't involved to ask. There was no building permit pulled.
Okay. Is this site in the buffer zone? Is it riverfront? What
It
is
was a buffer zone only project. The whole site is stabilized. There's a pretty significant, there's where the swing set is, there's a pretty significant rise. So nothing looks like it's getting into the wetland area.
Okay.
The wetland area is off to the back, I believe.
In the back?
Yeah, past the swing set. Behind all those properties, farther. I didn't see any alterations to the wetland resource area. I thought everything was done substantially to plan except for the deck.
Except for the deck, but it looks like there's grass between the deck
Yeah,
and
there's lots, it's plenty stabilized.
stabilized and vegetated.
It's my recommendation that the commission issue a certificate of compliance for this property.
Any discussion, comments? All right. Did you have something, Amanda?
Oh, no,
Okay.
no, I said maybe.
All right, do I have a motion to issue a COC for 199994?
I will make a motion that we issue a COC for 73 Keeneland Street, DEP 199994.
Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll say it.
All in favor? Thank you. Royal Oaks Way, DEP 199-1066.
I'm Mary Pinto, and I've been working for the applicant, the Oaks Environmental, for Brian Campanelli, and he's at another hearing tonight, so we split the meetings.
Okay.
His property owners that have purchased the home and are living in a hotel, and waiting for the building department basically to issue a certificate of occupancy, I believe, and we're also looking at least a partial certificate of compliance at this point.
So the building department was originally waiting on us saying that we were okay at the site, everything was built to substantially. They wanted them to have filed the COC before they issued the occupancy permit, which they did. And then there was another issue, I guess, that arises that they never received an as-built. So they're working on that with them, so occupancy permit should hopefully be coming.
Okay.
But we're not the issue for the occupancy permit being held up.
All right. Yeah, the only thing that remains is a little bit of the front yard needs to have grass. It actually come in, they seeded it. They're going to come back and hydro-seed it because the grass is just not taking to any great extent. The rest of the yard looks looking great.
Angela, when were these pictures taken?
Those were taken last week on Friday.
Okay.
Mine's
And what are we looking at here? I mean, I see a stump.
I just took pictures of the areas that we had issued the enforcement on. Mainly the back area where you see the stump is where an intermittent brook is where there was some silt breach. You can see there's vegetation. The hay bales are decomposing back there. They did remove all the erosion controls on the site before I visited. The only issue, there was another issue that was addressed in the letter from the engineer is on the site plan, is that it looks like there was 126 alteration. Marion said it was in the buffer zone, but the engineer put it as in the wetland, from where he shot it, I guess, that's what.
Yeah, because the blue flags are up, and the hay bale line is on the wetland side of where the water line was put in. There was a stub of a water line that was put in when the subdivision was proposed, and the water lines all went in, and the stub was there, so they had to connect to it, and the stub was actually in the wetland. So they connected to it, that got restored, and the embankment was lined with riprap. But the embankment is about 5 feet from the wetland flags.
I have the asphalt here.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would like to. Yeah,
Sure.
Signia trip.
Like one of these pictures right here, and sorry, there's like, looks like.
That's where the footing drain is. I was just showing you how the area is not stabilized.
Okay. That's why I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, but the footing drain, I believe, is right here in the wetland factors there. I believe this is a 1" to 20 scale. Correct. 1 to 10.
1 to 30.
1 to 30.
So I called Brian today to see if they hydroseeded, and we got it.
Yeah. All the erosion controls have been removed. I was a little surprised that that was part of the conditions not to have those removed, but I understand they sold the property.
The one area, they have a very thick growth of grass that forms a ring around those lawn areas off the pavement. So it looks like it may have been where the road controls were and the seeds fell out or something and produced this line of grass that'll help slow the water down coming off the pavement. I'd recommend some wattles around the riprap area in the meantime. That little, riprap where the footing drain comes out, it's kind of a bowl shape there, and I think that there's some potential for the lawn to erode before the grass comes in. I mentioned it to him, but I don't know who gets to do it now.
Yeah, that was my concern. I kind of explained that to Mr. Campanelli, that my concern is that the commission issues a partial certification, who would be responsible for finishing up the rest of the order conditions. So I did receive an affidavit from the new homeowners saying that they understand that peer review builders would have to come back and rectify any issues that the commission sees on the site, as well as that they're aware of the order conditions in place.
Say that again, the builder's gonna come back and fix it.
That is what the affidavit says.
What happens if they don't?
Presuming the homeowner
That's, she's like, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes what happens at the sale is they hold money out of this at the sale.
Yeah.
Right.
Until that gets fixed. And
Yeah, Mr.
that's
Campanelli
what
told me that was
So I have issues with that.
Is there a continuing condition in the order that requires there to be no erosion? Because that continuing condition could apply to the new owners anyway.
Yeah, there are
they would
perpetual
definitely-
conditions, but that is not one of them. And if we wanted to start amending conditions, we'd have to
Yeah.
amend the
The other
whole
thing is,
order.
I mean, ultimately you can issue an enforcement order if there's an issue in the buffer zone.
Yeah, but is it, we just saw another issue, we issued an enforcement order on homeowner, which is
I know.
not
But
ideal.
yeah. But they have signed an affidavit that says they know there's responsibility.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I, for one, am not in favor of partial certificates for an order of conditions for a single lot like this. I mean, there's no reason you can't wait until the work is
For
complete.
spring, yeah.
Right, I mean,
As long
frankly,
as they
I
can
don't know
do
how
it,
that helps
it's
the title issue, other than there's a potential for our certificate to not get worded properly, or somebody to misread a partial as having the full certificate or something like that, and then some future homeowner stuck with the problem. The only time I think partials are helpful and worthy, for instance, is when you have a subdivision come in and you might have a number of lots outside of our jurisdiction, but it shows up on the title because of the parent parcel, and then you issue a parcel to release lots that aren't even within our jurisdiction, or something of that nature. But
Sometimes the banks require some assurance that Yeah.
we require assurances too,
Yeah.
and it's just finish it. I mean, I think this project's been more work than anybody wanted from the beginning, so let's just get it done
Yeah.
before we finally sign off on it.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I see here, I mean,
think
just from
Mr.
pictures.
Campanelli's expectation was that it would be done in the spring and he'd get a certificate in the springtime. He expected that it would be, just so long as they can get a certificate of occupancy from the building department. That's all I was really looking for. But they required the application.
So what, just for clarification, what's the building department requiring from us on the CO?
When they issue a CO in a new house, they call my office to make sure that there's not open order conditions and that they've met all of the orders and conditions. Just to kind of assist us, so we don't have any fines or anything, to make sure that we get our certificate of compliance is filed. They've seen it happen as well, where people buy a house, don't realize it's wetland, and then they start filling the wetland, and then I have to go out and enforce it, and it causes issues. Well, the building department didn't know, and so we're trying to work together more to.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's
But at this point, it's not holding up the CO.
not unless he said that if the commission had an issue, they would hold the CO, but. I told him, we can't really hold up a CO for site issues.
I was gonna say, personally, I don't have any issue with the CO.
I was like, they already filed
I have the
certificate of
issue with the
compliance.
certificate of compliance from us until the work's done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and,
And that's what me and him kind of discussed.
yeah. And the builder expects that too,
Yeah.
so that's fine.
So this little strip here, it's kind of, this is actually the city's access to the open space, right?
Can't see it in front of me.
So this adjacent strip right here, because this is all the open space for this development, correct? And this is the narrow strip. I think there was supposed to,
Yes,
the
it's-
developer put a sign, so it was supposed to put a sign, access to city, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if that was under, that wasn't in the special conditions for this property, that may.
No, but but the only reason I'm saying is like,
It's all wetland.
we want to keep
It's
this.
a complete wetland, it's, you can't walk through it.
Yeah, but in the wintertime,
It's a
I'm just
stream.
thinking, if this is the driveway, we want to make sure that they're not pushing snow and blocking access to snowshoers and stuff too. So if we want to make sure, like, I don't know how they control snow in the winter, but it's not related to this specifically, but this is a scary site. I definitely
Yeah.
would like to see it stable. But I mean, I know that
At least the homeowners know that it's wetlands right there.
no, we are putting flags up, right? Our
I
signs.
think that was in the order conditions, that was one of the older ones before we redid
Oh.
the boiler. I will triple check, I don't believe it was in the order conditions. But I don't think that Brian would be objective to not, I can hand those over to him and. I'm still looking.
Right, no.
Okay, I was like, I don't have to take it when I walk away from them.
So it sounds to me like the majority of the commission would like to hold off on that at this point.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye now.
All right. 66 Granite Street. Mrs. Lane. Representing yourself? What do you-
And tonight, yes.
Okay. I guess bring us up to speed, Angela, of where we're at. I guess it was brought to our attention that some things were happening at your site. You had Mr. Morrow representing you for a while. He was coming in and not coming in. The problem we had is he was the conservation agent back in 2000 when the DEP had an issue with your property. So he is under a, what is it called, a lifetime ban? Is that
Yes, it's a forever ban.
a forever ban? So basically, we brought it to his attention that says, you shouldn't be doing this. He chose to step away. So at this point, you can either represent yourself or you can hire somebody else.
Let's see how it goes tonight, to be honest with you.
So basically,
My
back.
finding is that I'm not really getting all the information and all the communications that I probably should be.
Okay.
And so I'm sitting here answering your questions. This might resolve very quickly.
Okay.
So, and I'd like to take that approach, to start with, because your time's valuable, and honestly, I canceled the trip to Pennsylvania to drop off some of my product today so that I could be here.
Okay.
So,
basically, I forget who was the first, was it a neighbor?
Yeah, there was an abutter who contacted my office about work being done along the stream, the river there, the brook, sorry, the brook.
Brook, yeah.
He wasn't sure what work was being done. There was pipes being put in. It was thought to be drainage. I was able to see it from his property. He sent me pictures as well. So I had spoken to Mr. Morrow about it. Mr. Morrow said, no, it's irrigation. I met with Mr. Zaney on site and walked it, and it was irrigation. He also had put in a cement pad for a new pump. Is that the
Sewer pump in the
It's for a
pond.
pump for the farm pond, which was another one of the complaints, was concern about that, and just kind of the work for him to adjust his irrigation systems and make them up to standard to work with the new pump, because the new pump obviously was better than I don't want to
yeah,
be
I mean,
rude.
the old pump was, submersible, like in the pond coming through the whole system. It just only did about 26 gallons a minute. This one does about 300 gallons a minute. It's, it's sized right for what we're trying to do. We flick a button and it does about 300 gallons a minute over the entire area. Nice gentle spray.
Okay.
But it did require a cement pad to hold it up. Not a big one, just a real small one. And it needed some elevation to make sure that the suction pipe going into the irrigation pond was at the right angle.
Okay. So, it brings us back to riverfront, wetlands, what's exempt, what's not exempt. We're still, and over the last few months while you weren't here, we're trying to get a handle of, is irrigation, was it irrigation? Concrete pads getting placed in buffer zones or resource areas, is that
Say it's
allowed?
within 10 feet of the actual pond. I'd say that it's in the maintenance area of the pond.
So we,
Before it was
Oh, it was there
gravel,
before.
gravel, and
Yeah, it was gravel before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so again, it's kind of an ongoing issue that normally it comes down to, it'd be a violation. You being agricultural, what is exempt, what's not exempt. We've reached out to some people to help guide us in that direction. There's even been questions about, is your entire site considered agricultural, where you're selling product, you're not growing it? Is that not?
According to, well, if you look at that handout, I know Angela has it. As soon as it arrives at my house or my place and it is getting watered, it starts being under my care immediately. So we're growing it from different stages. Whether I take it as a cutting from a seed, whether I'm taking it as a tree that comes in as a potted, area like that. At whatever point the agricultural product is coming into my place, I'm responsible for caring for it and taking it on at that point. Let's say I buy a pig and it's 300 pounds. It's to me the same as buying one at, 30 pounds, whether I slaughter it in 2 weeks or I slaughter it in, 6 months to a year. So I think that's the way that they interpret most of those products that we're selling there. And when you're looking in that buffer zone or in the water zone, you're really looking at agricultural products pretty much alone.
Well, it was brought by some of the commission members, me personally, is what you're doing at the front of your property is no different than Home Depot. You're bringing in a product for sale. They're not agricultural, so does that, obviously your fields are, your ponds and everything where you're actually physically growing things. But if you're bringing in a product from outside and placing it there, and yeah, it's going to grow, obviously in pots and whatever. Again, what is agricultural, what's not agricultural?
I can send
what's
you to the
exempt?
definition of that, but I would have, I'm gonna have to get back to you with that. And I do know where that is. That's pretty easily defined.
And another thing on this site was the conservation plan was given to us, but it didn't address any of our concerns. It focused more on soils, your fields, things like that, but it didn't address the drainage issue we had a couple years ago. I think it was 2 years ago, I'm not sure. Was it 2 years ago or a year ago? Anyways, so we're just trying to get
Well,
some
the purpose
clarification.
of it is to address what they find for problems. And the only thing they really came up with, and I'm looking at it right here, and I can read what they found for problems. Soil erosion evidence is very mild gullies at the edge of the brook. Soil quality degradations, evidence of excessive salinity in the spring does not to appear on site. And as you go through, there are sections where they have those concerns. There's really, most things are saying no problems, can't find any problems, not finding problems. That's the only thing as I read through this that I can find that's coming up with any kind of negatives, is that there is, on the edge of the pond, there's some small gullies from erosion.
Correct.
Aside from that, I mean, it almost, they're addressing things by saying they're not finding any issues. They're saying that the fields that we're using are either covered properly or have the fabric on them for
Right.
irrigation. We're using drip irrigation instead of overhead irrigation. All of our pesticides are stored in a pesticide cabinet off-site or on-site, but well out of the areas and safe. They're not finding issues. I mean, this is only going to address, this is supposed to give me recommendations on things that I can work on and work with. And they're, honestly, what I'm hearing from the Conservation Service is that my farm is miles ahead of other ones, just because of the fact that we're putting, buffers of chips around our farm to slow things down. The fact that we're separating our water before it goes back into the pond. Our irrigation pipes are solid; they're under the ground. So when we have a solid pipe compared to those aluminum ones that stick together and leak all over the place, you get massive amounts of erosion with those immovable ones. From what I'm hearing, nobody has benches in their greenhouses that collect the water and bring it up and do bottom things. It reduces all the use problems that you're having. So honestly, the report, it's been very handy to me because it really has pointed some things out to me and it's pointed me in some directions, but it's not showing any issues.
But they're not seeing what it was like before and what you did to those. Back a couple years ago, there was this issue with drainage. That person that did that didn't see what was there before. They don't know that you added this drainage pipe in. They show up and they see what they see. Doesn't make it right,
You have to
doesn't make
determine
it
whether I'm
wrong.
exempt or not for that.
Well, that's what I'm
concerns.
saying.
And the way I read the regulations, I find myself completely exempt for it. And that is normal farming practices. So, I mean, I don't know what else, I mean, I'm at a standstill at this point because, what's normal practices, what's not normal practices. I mean, now you're at least recognizing that I'm a farm, or at least mostly a farm. And so I think, at least from my point of view, I feel like we're starting to communicate, which is great. But, you have to tell me what I'm not exempt for.
But that's the issue we have is we looked at, or I personally looked at zoning, and more than half of the cities are zoned RA, residential agricultural.
Yep.
Yes, you run a farm, but does that constitute every square foot of that farm is agricultural exempt? Doesn't mean if my house is zoned residential agricultural, I'm exempt if I'm planting a garden.
Only if you have 5 acres
It's
more.
very questionable, and basically my biggest issue, and possibly some of the other things, is the area where all this is happening isn't farmland. It's up against a brook in a more retail area that
Well, that's where I grew all the mums.
is...
All 7,000 of them this year. That's where the shrubs have been there for 2 to 3 years growing on in pots. I mean, within the first 50 feet of that stream, there's nothing that I haven't grown there for more than 2 years. Maybe mums started in June, but yeah, I mean, that's what that is. That's a growing crop area. And I rotate things through it. I mean, it actually is used, and it's used to grow. I grow 90% of what we sell there.
Angela? Yeah.
Yeah, so after, discussing with Mr. Zaney and, doing some research and discussing with the state level, they still want to come down, and we discussed having someone from DEP come down and kind of give us a little training on, farming and agricultural and what they're exempt from. But kind of, just doing research, what he's doing there is exempt, in my opinion. It's exempt, It is considered agricultural. It's zoned correctly. I forget exactly how many acres it is. It's
What we're using right now is about 7.
7 acres.
That's under my name.
Once,
The rest of it is
once you
like
get over
1
a certain,
3/4. That's
his
rental
livestock
farming.
on the property. There are growing fields on both sides as well. And kind of just from my discussion with the state, he's exempt.
One thing though in the regulations, and it is a lot of it, it says, what's, I mean, it kind of lists some things that are allowable, but pretty much all of it says it's still something that needs to be brought to the attention of the commission before the work is done.
What kind of, I mean, what things?
Well, like, when we were there was a drainage pipe that went from the greenhouse right to the brook. And there was, in your report, it mentioned that Minusnack Brook has issues with, I don't know,
Was it E. coli?
E. coli, whatever it was.
I'm not sure.
So if you're directly discharging nutrients into an area that's already affected with high levels of bacteria, you're only exacerbating.
Angela had said she thought that the state was gonna come down and check, water samples or do something like that. I'm all for it, go for
Yeah,
it.
no, I mean, that was,
But I would request that they check upstream, downstream, and right where I'm at also, so that we can identify if there are issues where it's
Yeah.
coming from.
I mean, that was, I think that was our biggest issue from day one.
Yep.
When we brought it up a year or two ago, and it was just, either,
Well, farms do use fertilizers, they do
Right,
use
but-
manures, they do, but to be honest with you, I'm using very little of all of it.
yeah, it's the direct discharge into a pond that runs through the center of town that has high levels of bacteria that's the concern. I mean, there's other things you can do to get rid of nutrients before, rather than just discharging it directly into a pond,
Well, you know what, if getting rid of those nutrients are standard farming practice, I'm all for it. Let me know what that standard practice is. Farming isn't always the best practice, it's what standard is. And, and that's what and I'm above standards. I know I am, 100%. I know you had a problem with the little catch basin that was put in. Well, that was put in to separate the sediment that's going into the stream. Now I don't have sediment going back in. When I dump 300 gallons of water a minute over my cropland, and that's what I do, it's either going to run across the top and carry sediment right back into that stream, or it's going to go into that little catch basin, it's going to separate and be clean as it goes right back to where it's going. I have multiple, ways of doing it. There's nothing, I can't find where having it piped underneath my cropland is a problem. I don't know. I'm willing to explore it with you. I really am. I've come a long way since a year ago. But I'm not finding that my practices or my daily things are really, something that, isn't exempt.
Well, I think one of the issues, again, that I don't want to speak for the commission, for myself, is, there's ponds. I don't know if you were here for the early discussion with the pond, Doyle Pond, we have Lake Samoset, we have different water bodies that have exemptions, non-exemptions, this and that. I'll give Lake Samoset a perfect example. Is they do, I don't know, you live over that. I mean, they're always doing something there at the pond. They're always doing cleaning, vegetation, whatever. They have plans and all their regulations, but I guess mainly before they do anything, most of the time they're coming in front of us, even if it's informational. Say,
Are they farmers?
No.
Okay.
But,
I mean, 20 years ago, the DEP came down. We had the whole conversation that we're having right now, we had 20 years ago. They came down. I asked for a freedom of information thing. You said you'd have it to me by the 11th, so I can review what their findings were. But my recollection was that they wanted me to, if I could, stay 25 feet away. They told me the next time I touched my pond, they wanted me to separate it from the stream. They asked me to keep my animals 25 feet off of the stream and not directly drink out of it. We're using the same space that we were back. In fact, back then I think I was using a little more. I've let some of it actually, go into true wetlands. There's an area in the back that I adore it. I mean, there's an area of wetland shrubs, and that's an incredibly rare thing. So I've literally just given that back to nature because I just don't want to have my animals grazing in there. I pulled them back. We've even changed the fences in that area so that they can't go out. But, I mean, honestly, that's exactly what they came to as a determination. I'd love to see the state come down again, take a walk through. I'd love to be there too when they're doing it so I can be educated at the same time so that I can know exactly what I can and can't do and what's happening. So, I don't know what else to say short of I really do believe deep in my heart that I'm exempt from my farming activities and it's truly farming, 100%, all the property.
I guess from this commission, it may go a long way if whether you're exempt or not exempt. Sitting here in the spring saying, hey, I want to do some irrigation pipes 10 feet from the brook. Let's talk about it. Whether you're exempt or not doesn't mean we can't we can't stop you if you're exempt. But there's no hurt in coming and saying, hey, I want to do this, or I want to do that. And that's why I use Lake St. Louis, they do a lot of that. They'll say, hey, we're going to do this just for information, because when a
Well, I can tell you what my
homeowner,
spring plans are. That pump is very, very expensive. It's gonna have a small roof on it. Probably won't have sides, it's just to keep the rain off of it. I don't know if that's a pop-up $99 tent from, Job Lots, or if it's going to be 2x4 with a small roof on it. But that just has to happen. I'm definitely looking into a herd of Kiki goats. We're gonna be starting a breeding program with that. There's areas that I'm gonna be putting them onto pasture. We've been letting them, my regular goats are in there now, periodically throughout the whole property, but we're gonna be fencing that in. So I think that's the only big projects for next year. I really don't have anything really planned. Basically, everything's done. There's nothing really for me to do. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I have no plans over the next 4 to 5 years. I mean, that can change like that with, conditions and farming reports and that sort of thing. The reason we're doing the goats is because it's the only commodity in farming right now that's 30% underrepresented in the market. There's money to be made there. I certainly wouldn't want to be growing soybeans or corn or, my goodness, milking cows. I'd shoot myself. These guys are suffering. But, I change quickly to whatever it is I need to do. I mean, we're growing I don't know if you've been up into the back field lately. I mean, but we have the whole thing planted with zucchini, summer squash. We started a small farm stand right in that building. It's completely dedicated to vegetables at this point, and that's where we plan to stay until that's not profitable anymore. Farmers we just keep shifting around, changing our crops, moving things around. That area that you're talking about, that's by the stream, that used to be trees, but the program here in town that gives away free trees has stopped me from growing them, unfortunately. So we've shifted from that. Now we're growing mums down there, growing some small shrubs. But it's in a transition state, and that's why you saw us down there laying field fabric down, changing the irrigation systems, changing the things that the crop needs. I can't tell you how I'm going to change crops in a certain area, but at some point in time I'm going to change it up again. So I mean, I don't have a problem coming down and talking to you and letting you know what we're doing. I've tried to do that recently. In fact, I don't even think you knew I was doing all that stuff. I came down, just basically it started, and I came down and said, hey, Angela, here's what I'm doing, blah, 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 blah. You're probably going to get some phone calls. I'm doing some leveling of the fields. I'm digging out the pond. I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And this is where that all started, because I actually was vocal. I can't speak to my neighbor, but I think that there's going to be some split in place so that he's going to probably stop, unless there's something real. I want to make sure that he understands that, I'm feeling it a little bit like harassment. So I suspect that's going to stop.
any other questions, comments? You good?
Can we have the state come in and do the walk?
Unfortunately, I believe the reason that they had done the walk back, 20 years ago was because a determination of applicability was issued, and Mr. Zaney appealed that determination, and then they came through and they did their superseding order process, and that's why they had walked that down here. I believe we've already issued a determination, and that appeal period has already gone through. They're not really going to come down and step over our jurisdiction. They'll come down and educate us and help us understand the regulations. They had no problem doing that. I'm not sure right now if their staffing needs. But I don't think it's reasonable to ask them to come down and do a walkthrough on the site.
Well, I think for educational purposes, I know Mr. Zanni even mentioned that he would like to have them come and have us all there. So
If
we're
you're
all
going to
on
do
the
an
same page.
educational walkthrough without determinations, I'll be more than happy to host it. I will say this, I have no plans of turning soil over. It's the wrong time of year to do any of this stuff. I need my soil. It won't be turned over. There's nothing to be done until springtime, because I just can't grow vegetation and ground cover and that sort of stuff. So all work on the site is it's been done for a while. So, we've got time. I don't have an issue with that. If you really want to do an educational walkthrough or have a meeting here and educate about what's doable and not doable, I don't have a problem with that. I'm completely open to it. But yeah, I do remember that I had appealed it, and the determination came back that what I was doing, there was nothing wrong with it. That's what I was speaking to before. They came right out, they said, stay if you can 25 feet away. There's reasons you can be in the buffer zone, but try not to be. Keep your animals out. and they didn't like my pond because it was completely attached to the brook. And I understand now, 20 years later, why. That pond will never have to be dug out again because it's totally separate with a pipe flowing backwards back into it. So that's a very passive backward thing. And I mean, unless we have like ridiculous floods like the 1953 hurricanes, water will not come up and disturb it.
But from my understanding, the state, when I spoke to Judy about it, she said, she wouldn't be able to come down. They kind of intervene on our process, as well as I think it'd be a violation of meeting laws for us to kind of go on a site that we're having discussions about and basically ask them for help. She said she'd be glad to come down and help us understand the regulations further, though.
Well, I think,
Just not.
for some of us, it would definitely be helpful. Because, I mean, Moosonok Brook runs right through the town. It's very publicly contaminated because of all the factories from years and years ago, and the town's been doing quite a good job trying to clean it up and get it to where it is. And I just get a little nervous about people that are right on the brook and doing things without us not knowing about it. And that's just my fear.
Well, I understand that. I mean, but I do have a right to be there and follow. I truly do.
I'm not going to argue that.
Yep.
You may not. I'm assuming you do under those things. But when as the governing body for a project in a buffer zone or riverfront, us not knowing the facts or the real regulations, it's easy for us to say you're wrong when you could be right, or vice versa. And when a property owner comes in and says, well, I'm exempt, and we don't know the answer, what's the answer?
Education.
Well, that's what I'm saying is you can say you're exempt. I don't know if you're exempt or not. You're right, you're wrong, I don't know. And I think a lot of the commission members don't know at this point. So, and we're just trying to look out for the best.
Divided, some are. I'm sure you're right up there.
So it's just we're trying to figure out, we're trying to protect the environment of City of Leominster and trying to do what's best. And, we're going to work with all property owners and homeowners and everything else to, you guys have rights and we're here to protect the environment of the city.
So what do you want to do going forward?
I think I'd like to get some education from DEP, Department of Agriculture, whoever that may be, just to figure out so we have a better understanding of what should we be looking at? How should we be voting when it comes to agricultural? It's one thing to be a property owner, you have a house. Farms, we don't have a lot of farms in town.
I don't know, that's what left from what I understand.
Do you know what I mean? So
when I did my 61A paperwork this year, he looked at me and he went, what? A real farm?
Right. So, we just don't know. But, or at least I don't want to speak for you guys. So, I think education goes a long way.
And to be honest, I mean, I put in long days, sometimes 12, 14, 18-hour days, 7 days a week. The last thing I want to do is to have to give my daily plans or my plans, to a body that, if I don't need to do that. I'm not out to, I'm there because of the water, I'm not there in spite of it. And that's the difference. I'm there because I need to pump the water out. That pump goes on at 2 in the morning until 9 a.m., 300 gallons a minute for that entire time. All that water's just going up into the air, it's landing right back onto the ground, and it's going right back into the stream. Whether I have a catch basin, whether I have underground pipes, I try hard to make sure that it's going in and it's filtered and it's clean one way or another. Most people just have an irrigation ditch that goes right back to the low areas. Water goes downhill no matter what. So when you pump it out of one spot, it's going to go right back to where it comes from. It's going to hit that low spot. I work really hard to make sure that it's clean. I don't really even spray, I don't even use restricted pesticides. I'm using mostly biological controls at this point. I'm a nematode king, 4 billion of them at a time. But it keeps my pests down, it does all the things I need to do. I'm even choosing my crops differently. The things that I grow are things that don't need to be sprayed. 2 reasons, because it's monetarily easier for me to grow something that doesn't cost $200 sprayings or do all these things and put all that time into it. But it also allows me to let somebody else who's at a different facility spend all their money on something that they can deliver to me in a form where I don't have to put as much care into it. So when I buy something in, it's usually something that is 3/4 grown, and all of the growth regulators and all of the mildews have been taken care of, and all the pests and the bugs have been taken care of. I bring them in, they go onto the shelves, and then we take care of them for however long until that particular product is ready to be sold. But yeah, I mean, a lot of care goes into protecting that environment. And if you really read this report, you will see, read it and think, they're outlining the things I'm doing to protect the environment. And where there are problems, they're outlining the issues, saying, okay, we see a small amount of erosion here. So yeah, I mean, you're going to find if you read that conservation report or that farm report, you're going to find that they're actually applauding me. They're not tearing me apart. And I have nothing to do with them. Here, please come down, walk around, do what you need to do, visit all the sites, do all your research, please give it back to me. And this is what I got. I was pleased with it. It means that all of my efforts over the last 22 years have ended in, you know, a farm that's not degrading. So,
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Just a quick one. I mean, I'm just concerned that we're overcomplicating things here. And this has gone on quite a long time. I've probably missed some of the discussions over previous meetings. But I mean, in terms of enforcement, if for some reason this commission doesn't know the regulations or things aren't great, then we need to give the property owner the benefit of the doubt until we have those answers. And I don't think we should be considering enforcement or constantly pulling people in because we don't know something and we're looking for answers. You know, with enforcement, I've always been pretty adamant. You got to be 100% certain that what you're doing is worthy of enforcement and you shouldn't be doing it. I know you've been here a few times already, and you're probably getting sick of coming in at this point too.
actually, get kind of used to it.
Well, there's better things you could be doing with your time. Just same as us too. I think having a quick educational thing on site for anybody that wants it would be beneficial. I haven't heard anything right now to date that says we need to give you enforcement. And I've been through agricultural things before. I certainly think the best way to do it is to just call or see our agent and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. You might be getting calls from an abutter or someone else driving by. Leave it at that. If there's an issue, we can address it, but it's just, I just think this is going on too long, too much. You know, the issues with nutrients and other things, well, that's not just agricultural site, that's everywhere. I mean, you look at all those subdivisions in the watershed that, you know, people are growing golf courses in their yards and spreading all that stuff, and it's hitting the street, getting into the storm system, getting there. I mean, we can't regulate the nutrients that he's putting on his crops. I mean, you can't quantify that. You can't. I mean, open to some testing, sure, but at some point, it's getting in the brook everywhere. I mean, I think that you have to look at the report that was done for him, where the problems are. I mean, it doesn't sound like there's a lot. If there's anything that needs to be addressed, fine, but I don't want to keep beating this site up over something that, well, we're unsure of whether you're exempt or not. Well, if we're unsure, then until we're sure, do nothing. But I think, I don't think this, frankly, I don't think the state's going to come out, at least when I say the state, the Department of Environmental Protection, the wetlands people, I don't think they're going to come out in the near future to look at this and educate us. I could be wrong, but I know they've got severe staffing issues right now. I've been in contact with them on other matters, and it's tough for them to get things done. Unless we're actually taking action on the property owner, which I wouldn't support at this point, I don't see them rushing out there for that. I just, I don't have any appetite to keep this thing going. It's gone on long enough. If there's any quick thing, I'm open to do an educational piece without the DEP if need be, but that's your call as well. But I just don't, and I have some experience with this. I know the people in agriculture on the state level. I can get more answers if I need to. I've been through enforcement with agricultural properties, not a lot, but some. And again, I agree with what you've said. Some of your practices are so much better than what I've seen on other sites. So I don't know. To me, it's just gone on too long. I get the commission's concern with impacts to the water body, but there's only so much of that we can regulate. And, it's not just coming from an agricultural site, it's coming from everywhere. I'd love to be able to tell everybody in their McMansions, stop throwing thousands of pounds of fertilizer on your grass. It's not necessary. Well, they're going to keep doing it anyway, and it's just, right. I don't know. I hate to keep seeing this on the agenda every month. That's just my take.
I agree with Brad, like I read through that stack of,
For exemptions.
yeah. And I have a bunch of questions. I couldn't vote anytime soon without knowing the answers to those questions.
That's kind of my suggestion was going to be to take this off the agenda until the commission, until we can organize a meeting where everyone's here to have someone come in and educate us before the meeting, maybe, trying to arrange some educational service for us to understand the exemptions better.
Now, rather than going, as we talk about all this, if we were to just put together a list of our major concerns, we have a circuit rider. There's gotta be people, isn't there someone at the state and DEP that's their job is to...
There's 2 people working there right now. So.
Right, but that's their job. So if we propose, these are the questions we have, their role is to get us the answers. Maybe it's not gonna be next week. Maybe it's a month from now. Maybe it's 2 months from now. But at least...
Personally, I'd rather save that kind of, asking them for help right now for times when we really, not that we really need it, but when we really need it and we really need assistance. For something like this, if we can have someone come down and educate us so we are more informed for when we have these situations arise, I think that would be the better route than to send in questions and wait 3 months for a response.
Right, but it sounds like we're gonna be waiting anyway. It sounds like if we're gonna, and I don't have a problem if the decision is to kind of just, seeing this on the agenda every, it's actually better now that, I appreciate you coming in. It's been on there, and, we kept saying, someone's gonna be in and nobody would come in. So at least, you're here and I appreciate that. But it's I have a question about the point source discharge, from the greenhouse, right? If we pose that question to the circuit rider, let them navigate their avenues with the state. They have peers in agricultural, and they can just get us the answer. We can ask a pointed question and get an answer. Maybe it's in a few months, but someone will get the answer.
I did approach that question with them when this first came up, and as basically told, a lot. You have to look at the agricultural exemptions. We don't really have it in the specialized in agriculture. Your commission needs to make that decision, the jurisdictional decision, and then you need to evaluate the exemptions. And from when I spoke with her, she said there is a lot that's exempt on farms.
Right, and that's why there's a whole agricultural division.
Department of Agriculture.
That's all we're asking for, is someone to say, yes, here's the question, and have a professional from the states answer. And then we can...
You could also head the Farm Bureau. They're going to deal with this stuff for every farmer, all the way from Western Mass all the way to now. I'm sure you could get some broad answers like, don't waste your time here. Yeah, maybe you're onto something here.
Right, that's exactly what I'm saying.
That's not like the conservation area, but that's where we call. If I have a problem or an issue, I call up the Farm Bureau, which I'm a member of, and I go, hey, what's going on? Can I do this, 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 and this? Yeah, you shouldn't have a problem. I need farm plates. Do I need a DOT number? No, Neil, you don't. As long as you stay within 140 miles or whatever. They're there for those agricultural issues, and they may not interpret. They will interpret the law for you, but they can't tell you what to do. But they can say, yeah, this is pretty standard practice, or this isn't.
Yeah. That's a lot better than not getting, being told we're not going to answer you. So that might, for the state to say that they're not going to help us, figure it out on your own is kind of...
That's not what they said.
It's just, they're doing other things for us. We've got, a couple of appeals going on, or possibly more, or something. It's just...
3.
I've been over there twice within the past week. It's just... they've got a ton going on everywhere. It's why we're not getting file numbers.
Yeah.
So this is not going to be, high on their radar.
Right, but it's a question, and there's got to be someone in the state of Massachusetts that has the answer. If it takes...
I agree with you. I think we all want to understand it better, but I think I agree with Brad's point, though, that that's kind of separate than dealing with this issue, because whether we send an email and ask a question, or whether we have someone from DEP come down to educate us whenever they're available, we're still waiting for the answers. I think really what we want to decide is, after having him come in and explain everything, and Angela's discussions with the DEP that what he's doing is exempt, we can't really, at least from everything I've heard tonight, there's nothing else we can really do right now.
No,
because we
I
don't-
agree with all of that.
You know what I mean?
I
But I
totally
think-
agree with all of that. I don't think this needs to be dragged out any further, but like, for me, the only question I have is the point source discharge to the stream. If we could just get clarification on that in the next 6 months, a year, it doesn't matter. I'm not gonna ask.
But
You guys
Mr.
are
Zaney, the
wrong.
problem we
That's
have
what's
is,
called DEP.
we,
That's the first I've heard it.
we have a list of exemptions, and the very first one says you can't put a discharge into a pond or a stream. That was the very, you cannot do that. But now everybody else telling us, oh, he's exempt. I read it over and over and over. We read it in here on a public meeting. It says, here's the exemptions, but the very first one, you did, and it says you're not exempt. That's what I have a problem with.
Ultimately,
That's the problem we have.
ultimately, our concern is the quality of Manusnak Brook.
That's correct.
So not that it's a simple answer, but I would propose that whatever agency we could use, do a quarterly monitoring test, upstream, downstream, and Mr. Zanni said he would be open to having the test done on his site. And then we'd have a window of what's going on in this brook, and we'd be able to tell if there is an issue or not an issue coming from that piece of property. Do we have any records as to what's in that water other than E. coli?
Yeah, so the DPW, they do run tests on that stream. But I think, if we're gonna start requiring it quarterly, like, that's gonna become a cost that we're gonna have to bear. It's not really fair to say, stop doing what you're doing for your work, you have this water permit, you need to test here, here, and here, because we need to see the contaminants, and kind of like how Mr. Stone said, like, there's so many contaminants going into that stream from people who are, living out in the wild, and, people's lawns, and all these other different factors are being put into this. It's gonna be very much near impossible to nail it down and say, this specific contaminant is coming from this property. I don't see a way that we're gonna be able, that's gonna be anything more than a search for a needle in a haystack.
How often does DPW, is it like once a year, or?
They do multiple testings throughout the year, for
In multiple
permits.
locations,
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
And how are those tests coming back besides the E. coli?
so that's not my department, so I don't oversee the water testing.
I think you have to go to DPW.
Yeah, you have to discuss that at DPW.
Good place to start. It would give us a window.
I mean, is there really a problem with fertilizer and nitrogen and potassium and all that in the stream? I mean, do we even know that that's a starting point? I mean, are we looking for something that might not even be there?
Well, that's kind of,
I mean,
it's,
Well, I mean, my answer to that is everywhere. It's everywhere.
it's every.
I know it's
But-
everywhere.
but
I
it's-
watch
but
the
it-
homeowners
right,
take their
but
40
it's-
pounds or whatever for their 8 square
Right.
thing and put it onto the road and into the, I mean, it goes down. I won't even sell fertilizer to them.
So I'm just, myself, I'm struggling with what's the sampling going to accomplish.
Nothing.
Because I mean, it's.
I haven't used fertilizer for
Right.
5
It sounds like
years.
it's already being sampled.
Yeah, different.
Well, I would doubt that
It's not probably as often.
Right.
I can't imagine the parameters covering what we're looking for, but.
And honestly, I'm not seeing algae blooms in my pond, I'm not seeing it anywhere, I'm not seeing the issues.
And that depends on other things besides nutrients. I mean, you can look at climate for that as well. There are certain years, every pond, we had a few years back, we had blue-green algae show up in a lot of different communities, and, the state was involved with that for health reasons. But the water bodies that I've managed, just every one of them got hit with some pretty high levels of blue-green algae that year. So and we know from year to year, there's no reduction of nutrients that are being sent to these water bodies. It's other things as well.
Yeah, and you could even test in the same spot multiple times, different times of the day. You're gonna get
Right.
all sorts of readings.
I just think that at this point, the commission, we need to schedule a time for a training. They have done trainings for MACC, multiple trainings on farming and agricultural webinars. I can reach out to one of them.
Do we know if that's a workshop that's available at the October?
I was just trying to think. I think I signed up for the culvert one personally. The
Cool.
culvert and stream crossing one. That's one I signed up for. But I can double check with them as well, as I have some connections in other towns. I can see if anyone else has any other advice for trainings.
I'd be happy with something like that,
Yeah.
something online. Something that even visually, just,
Yeah, just something for you guys to have in your toolbox.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally comfortable taking, I mean, I agree with Mrs. Stone that we don't want to keep calling something enforcement until we know if it is enforcement, but I think jotting down the few concerns we have and, trying to figure out somebody who can actually answer them, it'll just go away. The problem will either go away with that answer, or, it'll lead to more questions and more discussions, and we can figure it out. But to say that everyone is so busy that no one will answer, 3 questions, I think isn't an acceptable answer. I mean, I have
That's
no
not what
problem.
my answer was, it was just.
No,
that it's
no,
just
I
not
know,
worth
I
their
know,
time.
but I mean, it's like, it sounds like we're saying we don't want to bother busy people with questions, but if we ask a question today and we don't hear back until February, that's better than not asking a question and not getting an answer and just going back and forth. We've been doing this for, a year or two. Let's just jot down what our core questions are and find someone that can answer them. And in the meantime, we don't bother Mr. Zaney doesn't have to come in. We can take it off enforcement, and we find the 2 or 3 points that we're trying to figure out answers to, and we get answers to those questions. And that's it. I mean, there's got to be someone, if I said, hey, this is what I have a question about, there's got to be an expert, on the regulations that can say, hey, this is absolutely 100% allowed, or it's, a gray area and you guys should work something out. Here's some solutions. Here's what some farms are doing. Whatever. Like, it'll just spark a conversation and we can discuss it. But as it is right now, we have no idea. And I think we owe it to ourselves to at least try to find an answer. If the answer is it's allowed, it's exempt, then we have it in writing. And then Mr. Zaney gets a copy, and next time, 3 years from now, when there's a new commission.
That's not a determination, so that.
No, it's not, but at least it's somebody from the state that says, hey, look, I've evaluated, 50 farms, and this is, in my experience, this is a common thing that I believe is exempt. If there's someone from the state that's what they're paid to do for a living, and they tell me they believe it's exempt, and someone from the DEP also says they believe it's exempt, that's good enough for me. I'm not gonna try to rewrite laws, I'm just looking for someone that knows the regulations.
Yeah, I can most definitely reach out again, and see if I can get a different answer for you.
Because, I mean, to me, that would make this all go away if we got,
Okay. Any other discussion? I think I would recommend that maybe commission members maybe just come up with ideas, questions, maybe get it over to Angela, and then we can just address it at one of the meetings, who we want to send that to and whatnot, you know what I mean?
Now, you said the Farm Bureau, I mean, if they deal with farms, they can probably, I bet you there's someone there.
I don't understand what you're talking about, like direct discharge from the greenhouse.
Well,
It's like you're talking about
when we were there was a drain that went from the greenhouse right to the brook.
the greenhouse.
Yeah.
There's a drain that catches, it's not even a drain, there's a French drain that's not in the greenhouses, it's off, it's not even in the wetlands, this area. This is like on 74 granite, kind of comes down the greenhouse, and it's probably 2 or 3 feet off the greenhouse. And what that does is it collects any kind of groundwater or rains, whatever, and then it goes right into the pond, but that's it, there's nothing in the greenhouses.
Well, you were the
Greenhouse is
because
all
it
shed, the greenhouse is all shed, everything is tilted down towards, let's call it the brook for no other purpose, and then that all kind of goes to that one point where we have the catch basin where it separates and then sends directly in. So all water is directed in very, very logical fashion. So there's no runoff from the greenhouses there.
Well, when we were at the site, because we went out there a year or two ago, you were the one that said that the pipe went from the greenhouse to like a
It just
man-made
collects-
catch basin, and then
It
the
comes
pipe
off of
went.
the roofs and it catches it, that's it.
Because you had mentioned that there was like
There's nothing in
there was
the
like
greenhouse
carbon or
that-
something in there that would
No, there's
catch the
carbon,
organics or something.
No, there's carbon along the brook. There's probably 250, 300 feet that go from the pond all the way to the arborvitae hedge that's there. And that, when the water, all the water goes down to that point. So if you're looking at the brook, you've got the pond to the right, you've got the road over here to the left, all the water goes between those two things, it hits that carbon area, and it just kind of slowly leaks through, or it goes into the catch basin and goes back out. We're talking 100,000 gallons of water an hour, or 300 gallons a minute, 18,000 an hour times 5 hours a day. We're talking 100,000 gallons of water that is going, through that property and through that area. So, I mean, I have a choice. I can either separate the water, try to clean it best I can and get it into the pond, or I can just, honestly, we're talking about a $150 cover that goes down.
No, this isn't even that
We
area.
can fill that in and we can just have it like go across the loom and just be what it's gonna be. It'll just erode like crazy.
Yeah, no, the area I was talking about though was when we were out there, and it was the first time we were out there, which would have been maybe a couple of years ago. There was a line, there was a connection, there was a pipe that went from the greenhouse to like a catch basin that you did upgrades to.
Yes.
And then you had said that the water goes from the drainage from the greenhouse goes into there, goes into...
There's no drainage that goes to that catch basin. That's simply a spot where all the water's been designed to go to. There is no pipe that goes to that catch basin except the one that goes to 20 feet underneath that production area and right back to where we're pumping it from. There's nothing that goes from that catch basin up to the greenhouses. It doesn't exist. Everything from that greenhouse naturally finds its way down to the stream. I mean, I can take Angela out there and show her.
Yeah, I mean, I think that...
I get no problem with
right,
that.
and I mean, honestly, that was...
I think you're misunderstanding. There is no
It's
pipe.
quite possible, yeah, so you would, remember there was, the whole thing that brought this all about was a catch basin. There was
Mhm.
there was
There was a
upgrade.
pipe there for years, and what
Yeah.
happened is we had a flood coming off the road. We had one last night, but for some reason it didn't destroy anything.
Yeah.
The catch basin actually destroyed me from having to dig that up again. I was very grateful. Candy, good for her.
But yeah, so and I remember there was a you explained that the pipe went from the greenhouse to this detention, the
No,
thing.
there's no pipe that goes to that area. It all goes across the ground on the top. It all goes through that crushed stone area, and it just filters through the crushed stone until it gets down to that area, and then it has a separation, and it goes right into the stream. There's nothing that connects, that catch basin, it's 3 feet deep. It just has maybe a dozen cement blocks on there, not even cemented. It's got a cover on it, surrounded by stone, so it goes in, separates, and just goes in, but all the water naturally flows down to there. The entire garden center is designed to have water go to that area.
Yeah. So maybe it was just a misunderstanding of how it's laid out. It's just that I mean that would couldn't, because to me that was the biggest concern, is having direct discharge from a greenhouse going into the brook.
No, that's coming off of the actual cropland. That's
Okay.
cropland there. There's nothing that connects that to any of the greenhouses. That goes nowhere.
Yeah.
Take as much as you like.
The gummy fun mix. I haven't had dinner.
Yeah, so to me, that was my biggest concern, and like maybe it was, a misunderstanding. And so, and part of the problem is it's been 2 years of promises that somebody would be here, and it just.
Which I don't believe that was Mr. Dean's fault.
I'm
So
not
maybe
saying.
I just want to clarify.
No, I'm not.
Thank you.
No, I'm not. But I'm not either. I'm just saying. But that is what led. I mean, for 2 years, I was under the assumption that there was material going from that greenhouse into a catch basin, which was then directly discharged into the brook.
My greenhouses, most of them have, whenever I'm doing heavy fertilizers or something that requires a lot of nutrients, I have benches that actually collect the water, and then I can reuse that water. So I'm actually retaining and collecting a lot of my nitrogen in those situations. Those aren't cheap benches. That's about $40,000. Other areas where I have very low nutrient use, where I'm not really spraying, I just do a bench system. Or areas where I don't want to flood, because some things are really dry, xeriscape type plants, other things are kind of boggy, you don't mind flooding them from the bottom up. But each crop is kind of positioned on a bench that's going to be growing in the best way. But yeah, I mean, any water that is discharged from those greenhouses hit the ground, and they got to travel, depending on which greenhouse, anywhere from 25 feet to get to the drain. But those aren't really production houses, those are finished houses. They don't usually get much fertilizer. And the ones that are up, the two big ones up in the front are really the growing houses. So, I mean, that has to travel 100 feet, 200 feet through the crushed stone and through the sediment to get down there before it's separated and taken away. There's no pipes that connect it.
Like, to me, honestly, that was my my major concern. So, I mean, in the end, I think ultimately, if there are questions we have, I still think it would be best to try to run them through the channels. And that way, Mr. Zaney, ourselves, we have something on file. You know, because what happens, I mean, I've been on the commission, I don't know, too many years. But, you know, and I know every once in a while it's a new commission and, you know, things that will come up again, and then we have to go through this process all the time. So at least if there's a file and we have a letter from somebody from, you know, 2020 that says, hey, you know, I believe this is exempt, and here's some other farms that are doing the same thing. And, you know, we have a little hand sketch of, you know, the layout of the farm, and there's an X that says this is the location. And then, you know, 10 years from now, another, you know, you can open up the file and you can say, oh, look, this is already, you know, it'll save a lot of people a lot of aggravation. You know, in 2 years of wondering why there's direct discharge to the brook that doesn't exist. So it would be nice to have something just to, you know, keep, you know, this from happening year after year. And
I agree with you, because I've been on the commission for a while.
but I do appreciate you clearing that up, because that was apparently
Well, I didn't
my...
understand it, to be honest with what you were saying, so I'm glad that I explained.
Yeah, no, that...
All right, there's no other comments or questions. We appreciate your time, sir.
Super.
And if we have any other questions, we'll let you know.
Wonderful. Appreciate it. Would you direct email me if you could, Angela? Get me on that list? Even directly to Matt?
Oh, yes, so yeah, I'll email you now, and yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, 909 Elm Street. What's that mean, currently going to planning board?
Yeah, they're currently going through the planning board process, so there's been
Nothing's changed? Okay. No update on Harvard Street. Where does that stand?
They're working on the wetland replication area the last time I checked with them.
Okay.
We've been kind of playing phone tag. They keep calling me back, I keep calling them back, and we're not really connected, so I'm not sure if they're finished yet or not. I haven't had a chance to get over there.
All right, but they are in the replication mode.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that was the only thing that was left, right?
Yep.
Okay. Stock Brook, no update. Meeting minutes.
Yes, did everyone have a chance to review the July 16th, 2019 meeting minutes?
It's been a while, but yes. Does anybody know if they can or cannot vote on them? Do we know? I know I can. Okay.
I had the ground. I don't know if that was one I was here for or here partially for, but in any event, I don't.
Okay. Do you want to vote? Do you want to abstain? Do you want to wait? Has anybody else read them?
If I did, it was a long time ago.
Yeah,
I
I know I
don't.
did, but
All right.
Yeah, I don't
Do we have
remember.
any other minutes coming to us?
You'll have a view for the next one.
Okay. If you could.
Yeah, why don't we wait till the next
I was
one?
gonna say wait till the next one, if you can put them all kind of together, so that way everybody can review them. And we're absolutely, to be good.
Perfect.
Okay. What else is on here? Any extension permits?
None at this time.
Any new communications?
None at this time.
Any emergency certs?
None at this time.
Any project updates we need to know about?
None at this time.
Any commission members have any comments or questions for any current NOI, open NOIs projects in the town or city? Budget, you promised me a budget this month. This
didn't get you a
meeting, you
budget.
lied.
I didn't get your budget. You're doing a lot.
Next meeting is Tuesday, October 22nd, with the deadline of last Friday. Anything else anybody would like to discuss? Not seeing anything, I now declare the meeting adjourned.